we've got, we are recording, so be mindful of what you say. Just kidding. Share openly. Thanks for coming. This is the second of our webinar series. We are looking at retrofitting homes and clean energy retrofits. So we've got some partners, the Desh-Gunzeebing or Chippewas of the Thames First Nation, Natural Resources Canada, and the London Environmental Network, whom I am the executive director for. My name is Marianne, and my colleague Jamie Dardarian is here as well, and she'll be fielding any questions and helping with the Zoom platform if you need it. Like I mentioned, please mute your microphone. If you want to speak, no problem. You can unmute and ask any questions that you'd like. This is our schedule. So there are some folks that are signed on for all of the sessions, which is great. Just a reminder that tomorrow night we do have a slight change in time and we're going from 7 until 8 p.m. But for the rest of the schedule, the sessions are 5:30 to 6:30 p.m. We are a registered charity and we are helping London and surrounding area become more resilient and sustainable. We're an EnerGuide service provider, providing EnerGuide assessments, and we work to represent and strengthen the environmental sector. These are the environmental organizations that we currently represent. We work with them in grant writing and in shared resources and advocacy, and there should be some folks there that you recognize. These are the programs that the London Environmental Network runs. We have quite a few. There's lots of ways to get involved in all of them. So do visit our website on our What We Do page. You can get more information about all of these great programs, business facing, residential facing, youth, community engagement. So check it out and reach out to us and we can get you involved if you would like to be. Chippewas of the Thames First Nation is our partner in this project, and they are a LEN member. So we looked at their community energy plan that they put together in 2020, which identified the goals of improving energy efficiency, reducing energy costs, and assessing renewable energy solutions in the community, and put together a plan to work on a retrofit project together that would act as a pilot project or demonstration home. And through that home and through the touring of that home, we are putting together opportunities like this where we talk about the different aspects of the retrofit, as well as we're creating a video series and some case studies that we plan to send out in both English and Anishinaabe to surrounding community members. Without further ado, I'll get into the subject matter for the night. We have Steve Sponseller and Stephen Kenny from Net Zero Insulation as our first presenters. They co-own the business together. They are both energy auditors and together have completed over 7,000 audits. Their residential insulation company specializes in attic insulation. And in 2 years of operation, the company is growing and has helped hundreds of homeowners in their journey to improve their home energy efficiency and improve home comfort. They are a partner with us on the retrofit project as well. And I do have a video to share later showing some live action shots of the installation process. I don't think Stephen or Steve have seen it yet, so that's exciting too. So without further ado, we will hear from Stephen.
Can you see our screen and can you hear us? Awesome. We're not very tech savvy when it comes to this kind of stuff, so you might have to bear with us a little bit. But I'm going to let Steve Kenny start us off here.
All right. Well, our mission as a company, we are here to help customers achieve a comfortable, healthy, and energy efficient home, all while contributing to Canada's goals of achieving a net zero emissions by 2020. Hence our name. Sorry, by 2050. Hence our name. What we like to implore as our guideline is using the house as a system concept, where we like to not just focus on the attic itself, which is our specialty that we focus on, but we like to think of the house as a whole envelope where you look at basements, exterior wall, air leaks, how your furnace and air conditioner might help the home become more efficient as well. Sorry, Steve, go ahead.
So yeah, basically I'll just talk about a few things that kind of make a house an energy efficient home. And one of the things that we focus on is the envelope itself. And as far as when you're retrofitting a house, we are firm believers that you should start your retrofit journey by addressing the envelope of the house. And that's basically your envelope is what separates the conditioned space from the unconditioned space. So your exterior walls, it could be the basement slab or the ceiling in your upper level, and focusing on that building envelope before you really dig deep into the rest of the meat and potatoes of a retrofit when it comes to a whole house retrofit. And a couple things that will make your house more energy efficient, apart from the building envelope, is an airtight construction, air sealing around your windows, doors, outlets, vents, and many other places. High performance Energy Star equipment, better insulation in the walls, attic, and the basement. Having LED or Energy Star lighting, Energy Star appliances, and high performing Energy Star windows. So when we talk about the house as a system, there's a few different components, and I don't know if anyone was here for the webinar yesterday, but it was touched on, and she had a cool little chart there yesterday too. We don't have the fancy picture that she had on hers, but basically the house is made up of multiple components. They're different components, but they're all interactive with each other. And these components are the building envelope, mechanical system, the environment, and the occupants. So there's benefits of using the house as a system approach when retrofitting a home. And some of the benefits of that are you'll have enhanced home comfort, affordable to operate, becomes a healthier home, improve your home equity, and you'll have a smaller environmental footprint, less greenhouse gases, or your house will use less gigajoules, which was another thing that was talked about yesterday, and improved home durability. There's a few things that I like to talk about when talking about the house as a system, and why we think it's important to kind of view the house as a system, especially when you're doing a retrofit to your house, because you can kind of get one thing done and you might, for example, air seal your entire house. But if you're not thinking of the house as a system, and you're just thinking, okay, great, my house is more airtight now, and if you don't think of it as a system, you might overlook the fact that you've now the moisture laden air that was escaping through your walls or into your attic, it's now trapped inside your house, and you might have to increase the ventilation inside your house, add some mechanical ventilation with like an HRV or an ERV, because sometimes if you seal up your house too much, you'll end up with your windows will start to sweat and your house will be too humid. And that's one of the main reasons why looking at the house as a system is important, because when you do one thing, there's cause, and then there's the effect of what it's actually going to do to the other aspects of the house.
And as when people do those energy audits and they have their blower doors completed, that's a good way to figure out how efficient your house is running. So you can tell, based on our experience as former energy auditors doing thousands of these blower door tests, we can tell when a house is drafty, and we can identify where those problem areas generally are in the main part of the house, as well as now that we're up in the attics doing the work, we can find dozens of more places that you can't get to from the main part. So we focus on that, but we also give people information as to where they can also seal, not in the attic.
So things to consider, when you're doing air sealing, there's a kind of term that's thrown out there a lot, is to think of it as the ABCs. The ABCs, and starting with the attic as the most important place, due to something called stack effect, where in the wintertime, your warm air is rising and it's escaping through the higher parts of the house. And that creates a pressure difference in the basement where it's pulling in cold air from these lower spots. So you start by sealing in the attic where the heat's escaping, and then go to the basement where the air's infiltrating, and you work kind of like an ABC. So the attic, the basement, and then the conditioner, the center of the house is the best way to be the most effective when addressing your house's air tightness and you're trying to seal it up. You can see kind of on the picture there's different arrows where there's all kinds of different spots where you could be losing air around light fixtures, your top of your wall plates, electrical, plumbing penetrations in the basement, basically anywhere that something penetrates the house. So could be your furnace exhaust and the hot water dryer vent, hot water tank where they're exhausting out, water lines coming in and out of the house, stuff like that.
This picture's not too conducive of our environment in Canada. As you can see, the mechanical systems are in the attic space, which you find more in warmer climates. Like I've been down to some seminars in Tennessee, and they have all their stuff, because they don't have basements, they have all their mechanical systems up in the attic, which we don't run into very often. But that picture is a little misleading.
It's, yeah, I mean, we do run into it once in a while where there's a mechanical system in the attic. It's not a very efficient place to have a mechanical system, especially in our climate. But I mean, sometimes when people are doing a renovation, that's the only place
For space.
there's space for it, and they go from electric heat to forced air furnace, and it ends up in the attic.
Yeah.
But yeah. So some of the things to consider when you're working on insulation or doing an insulation project is the insulation's got to be properly installed for it to reach its full potential. One of the things that we see a lot of times in attics, and it kind of irks me a little bit when I go into a house and there's like 4 different layers of insulation, and one was done when the house was originally built, and then maybe a homeowner or somebody went up there and threw some bats in on top of the original insulation, and then the next person moved in and they called an insulation company because the house was cold and drafty, and then they came in and they dumped some more loose insulation on top of that, and then the next person moved in and said it was cold and drafty, and more insulation was dumped in on top of that.
Problem sandwich, we call that.
Yeah. So I mean, a lot of times before adding insulation, if you're not air sealing, the insulation is not really going to do much, because insulation is designed to slow the transfer of heat, and it doesn't stop airflow. So if there's a direct path for air to leak into an attic or into your walls, we would recommend sealing those spots before increasing the insulation. If the insulation is contaminated, wet, or contains vermiculite, which can contain asbestos, it should most likely be removed before adding new insulation. Or if you are up in the attic and you see all kinds of tunnels or mouse droppings, or evidence that there's animals living in the insulation, you should most likely, actually not most likely, you should definitely address the problem before adding more insulation, because if they're living in there now, the new insulation is probably not going to make them move out.
Yeah.
One other thing that I just kind of wanted to touch on about the insulation, how and being installed properly to reach its full potential. That's one thing that they do differently in the US than they do in Canada, is they actually have a rating system, and they rate the insulation on how it was installed, and basically they have 3 different levels, and the better it's installed, the higher the rating it is, because they understand that the insulation needs to be installed properly for it to reach its full potential. Whereas in Canada, it's kind of like, okay, the insulation's in the wall, it must be doing its job.
Yeah.
We see a lot of times buckled insulation, or where it's not in contact with the surface, it's not performing the way that it should be. So we focus our main area of expertise that we focus mostly on is attic insulation retrofits. We do basically 3 main components to it, and they're the air sealing, the ventilation, and increasing the insulation. This is kind of similar to the house as a system, almost like it's the attic as the system, where if you kind of forget about one thing and do the other, or it's not going to be as effective as what it's meant to be. So we start by air sealing the attic. A lot of times we'll remove the insulation in order to find all these spots, and that was what we did with the retrofit, the pilot project at Wanda's house, and we removed the existing insulation. We were able to air seal all the top plates, light fixtures, electrical penetrations, plumbing penetrations. She has a unique house, well, not unique house, but it's a side split. So there's a common problem in side splits where there's a half wall between the upper and the lower level that's usually never air sealed. So there's basically a between every single stud, there's a void direct path for the air to leak from the basement up into the attic. So we're able to seal those off too.
And when we do remove the insulation, you'd be surprised at the kind of things that you can find. So that's why we always recommend, there's an added cost to it, obviously, but to do it most effectively, you see in this picture here, you see this giant hole that sometimes you can uncover by removing the insulation, and without going in there and doing an in-depth quote and looking for these areas, which we find a lot, by just blowing insulation on top of existing, you're not going to find those spots where they could have a massive leak that we can simply fix with some techniques that we've developed, whether it's rigid board and spray foam, and discoloration on the underside of the roof without doing an in-depth quote. Once you see some color differentiation on the underside of the roof, you can assume or look for an air leak, because if it's moisture getting to the underside of the roof, you look underneath it to see what's causing that. So we're very thorough in what we do.
And then the ventilation is an important part of the equation as well, because basically in the attic, in our climate, you want your attic to be as close to the outdoor temperature as it is as possible. So in the wintertime, if it's minus 20 degrees out, you want your attic to be close to minus 20 degrees. In the summertime, if it's 30 degrees, you're generally the attic's going to be a couple degrees warmer. But if it's 30 degrees warmer, then you're most likely lacking proper ventilation. So the ventilation basically helps to regulate the temperature in the attic and expel the air and give it some airflow inside the attic. And then increasing the insulation, we aim to increase all the houses that we do up to R60. There's two incentive programs out there that a lot of our customers go through. There's the Greener Homes Grant. They require you to go to R50, and then the Enbridge rebate program requires the customers to go to R60. That's pretty much it for as far as the air sealing and insulation stuff goes. I'm not sure if there's any questions, or if they're going to turn it over to the window company and do the window expert and do the questions afterwards, or how you wanted to do that.
Yeah, I think we'll go, we'll have Kai speak now, and then if people have any urgent questions, they're welcome to ask them, or we can just get them at the end. So I'll have Kai load up. He's Kai Millyard from Green Communities Canada, and he serves as a service organization manager. He has also worked with Enercan in developing the EnerGuide program over a couple of decades, so he's very knowledgeable in this area. And Kai is going to chat with us today about window replacement considerations.
Thank you, Marianne. Yes, I am Kai Millyard, and I work for Green Communities Canada, which is a national association for not-for-profit organizations like the London Environmental Network and its sister organizations across the country. One of the things that we do with our member organizations is EnerGuide audits, and we have been doing that since 1997. We're the longest standing EnerGuide auditing firm in the country. And I've been here the whole time, and we've served about 250,000 homes over those years. So we've seen the industry develop over that time. And I've been invited to talk a little bit about windows today, whether I'm an expert or not. I'm an expert as far as these windows are concerned, because these were in my house when I bought my house 20 years ago. And sometimes you just want new windows because your old ones are ratty. And every part of a building, well, not every part of a building, lots of parts of buildings just plain wear out over time and do need to be replaced. Windows need to be replaced every 50 or 100 years. They ought to last that long. Well, the first thing to think about is, why is it that you actually are thinking about replacing windows? There are a bunch of good reasons to do it. Sometimes it's just that they're old and ratty. And, you know, another coat of paint just isn't going to do it anymore. You may be thinking about aesthetics, keeping up with the Joneses in the neighborhood. You may be planning on selling the house a few years down the road, and shiny new windows certainly help with curb appeal. It may be that you actually do have a comfort problem near some of your windows. It may be cold, but sometimes there are other solutions to that. As I'm sure you all know, windows are really expensive. And if you can manage, if the leakage and the draftiness is coming from around the actual window sashes, it may just be that the original weather stripping is worn out, and that's easily replaced. And that may be a much better solution. Sometimes drapes are a good solution in order to get some R value against that part of the wall and warm things up, rather than spending thousands of dollars on new windows. Although cold and drafty may also be a good reason to replace them in the end. And the last main reason that people want to do it is to reduce their overall heating bills. And window replacements can help with this, but you should always have an EnerGuide audit before you're going to do this or anything else of this kind in an energy retrofit. And your advisor is going to help you understand what's the best bang for your buck in the house. And they will tell you pretty quickly that replacing windows tends to be near the bottom of the list in terms of bang for the buck in saving money. They're really expensive, and they're, you know, if you've got a budget of $5,000 or $10,000, it's very, very likely that spending that money on insulation or draft proofing will get you a lot more energy savings than replacing windows will. Having said that, maybe you've done all the insulation and the draft proofing, and you want to reduce your carbon emissions, not only your heating bills, in which case that may be a good reason to replace your windows too. You have to be a little careful if you are doing this mainly to save money, and if you've talked to some window dealers already, there are sometimes claims out there about how much money you can save. A common number that comes up is 30% from some window dealers. And if you take that to mean 30% of your heating energy, that's just not true. You can, by replacing windows, save 30% of the energy lost through the windows. That's true. But that's not as much energy as it might sound, because the windows are only some fraction of the house's energy use. So be clear about your reasons before you sink your money into a project like this. Okay, so once you've decided you are going ahead, one of the first things you're going to have to think about when your window dealers come over to measure and show you what they've got is they're going to start talking about whether or not you want to do a replacement or a retrofit, sometimes called an insert. And a replacement is what's done more often. And that's where you literally remove the entire window, including all of the frame and all of the trim that's around the frame and up against the drywall. And they replace the entire thing. You get a new frame that goes into the rough opening and the window inside that, and then new trim against the drywall. And that is done more often. It requires some carpentry, so it is more expensive. And the other alternative they'll offer is an insert. And that's where the trim that's against the drywall remains. and only the sashes come out that are holding the glass, and a new smaller window with its own frame goes inside that. And as a result, there's less window area, less glass area, and more frame. But it requires less carpentry, and so it is a lower cost. Okay. What actually makes new windows more efficient than old windows? There are a number of technologies that have come along and been gradually introduced over the last 40 years or so. Low-E coatings is the first. These are an invisible film that is put onto the inside surface of one or both of, or maybe all three, if you have 3 panes of glass in your new window, inside the glass, and it reflects infrared rays, the rays that cause heat. That means if it's a window you're walking by or sitting near and feeling cold a lot, it will bounce your own infrared radiation back to you. These can make low-E coatings can make a big difference in terms of comfort. It keeps the heat in the winter, and of course it reflects it out in the summer too, when there's more heat outdoors than there is indoors. The next technology is a gas fill. All new windows nowadays are built with as a sealed unit. The glass is 2 panes normally, or maybe 3, with about a ½ inch space in there. And most new windows are filled with argon gas or maybe krypton. These are very, very heavy gases. They're entirely inert. They're just extracted from the atmosphere and concentrated and put in there. And what they do is they prevent what would otherwise just be air in there from rising on the warm side and carrying across to the cold side of that little tiny space and transferring heat from the inside to the outside. These are called convection loops. And without that gas, you get the air inside the window moving in little circles and transferring heat out. These heavy gases are just too heavy to move, and so they reduce heat loss in that way. That's not standard in all windows, but it comes in most better windows. Another one is warm edge spacers. The thermally weakest part of a window is not the glass itself. It's actually out at the frame, because the wood or whatever the R value is of the frame is lower than the glass, especially with these other features. And the spacers that are holding those panes of glass apart initially were always metal. You can look in there and see the aluminum spacer most of the time. But nowadays there are all kinds of warm edge spacers made of various kinds of rubbery and plastic. And there's even some metal ones, amazingly. But they significantly reduce the conduction of heat from around the edges. And of course, there are better frames. Some of the hollow frame types may be filled with foam now, some of the vinyl ones and the fiberglass ones. And the arrival of fiberglass frame windows is another big step in efficiency. They are, one of their main advantages is they're very thermally stable, which means they don't expand and contract. This is a weakness that vinyl windows have, is they really do respond to the temperature change and they expand and contract. So eventually their caulking is going to separate from the edges that they're caulked to, and they'll become leakier over time. That's not going to happen with fiberglass frame windows. And of course, nowadays we're moving to triple pane. You're going to see this more and more often, particularly with the new Energy Star standard, which are the best windows around. You don't require 3 panes of glass to reach that standard, but a lot of the manufacturers are including 3 panes now to do that. And all of this, of course, is just increasing the R value of the window. We usually think of R value as a term we use for insulation, but the R stands for the resistance to heat flow. So the bigger the R value, the more resistance to heat flow, the less heat loss there is. You can apply the same concept to a window, and They do calculate the R value of windows. They average the frames and the center of the glass so that you get a number that represents the whole window. Okay. You don't have to become an expert in all this technology, of course, if you want to replace some windows in your house. What you do want to do is look for the Energy Star label. Talk to the dealers right away before you even have them coming over. Find out if they even sell Energy Star certified windows. They don't all. You know, they usually represent one manufacturer, and that manufacturer may or may not be producing Energy Star windows. Normally, what Energy Star means when it's applied to products is that when you look at the energy efficiency of the full range of those products from best to worst, Energy Star is the top 20% performers of all the products. They're eligible to get an Energy Star certification, but they only get it if the manufacturers register their products, submit it to the Energy Star Authority, and then they're allowed to post the Energy Star sticker on the product. Even the best windows are only R4, 5, maybe 6. There's actually a lot of debate about this at the high end. They're not huge. Windows are still going to be a big source of heat loss in the house. So there are actually 2 tiers of the Energy Star certification. One is the basic Energy Star, top 20% of the performance, and there's an Energy Star most efficient, which is probably, you know, the top 10%, for example. And they are available in all types of frame materials, whether you like the idea of traditional wood windows or vinyl or fiberglass or whatever. If you're participating in the Greener Homes program, there is an incentive of $125 per window for basic Energy Star and $250 per window for the most efficient ones. However, they're very serious about only awarding those incentives for real Energy Star windows. And what will happen when you have placed your order and they finally arrive before the installers come to install them is you'll see that they have a sticker, a label that has to be on the window from the manufacturer to prove that they are real Energy Star certified windows. And you need to leave that sticker on there. Tell the installers not to peel it off. It has been their tradition to peel them off, and they might show them to you and say, look at your great windows, and they'll take the stickers away because they want your house to look pretty when it's done. But in order to get your incentives, your energy auditor, when they come back after your retrofit to measure it and confirm it, they have to see these stickers. So there they are. And if you know you have lots more work to do, once your windows are installed and you don't want to live with these stickers on your windows for 6 months, you can take pictures of them in the window further back and a close up of the sticker, and then keep all those and provide those to the auditor eventually. Because Enercan's going to ask for that proof. And I think that's all I had. It is all I had.
Thank you, Kai. We are going to show a quick video of some of the work that went down at Wanda's home, which is the Chippewas of the Thames First Nations retrofit project that we're working on. And there's going to be a little bit of repeat of information, but hope you enjoy the recap. And if you have any questions, feel free to put them in the chat and we'll get to them right after, or you can unmute and ask as soon as the video is done. Thanks.
All right, I'll give it a go here, and let me know if it's not working, if you can't hear it, anything like that.
I don't hear the music that I believe goes underneath it, Jane. There it is.
Hi, my name's Steve Sponseller. I'm one of the owner-operators of Net Zero Insulation, and we're here today at Wanda and John's house doing an attic insulation retrofit where we'll be removing the existing insulation and air sealing the attic floor, as well as adding some ventilation to the attic, and then topping them up to R60. The stuff that they have in the attic right now is fiberglass bat insulation, and I mean, it's still used quite commonly today, but the main reason why we're removing it is, well, A, because there's quite a bit of air leakage that is underneath the insulation that without pulling out the insulation, it would be next to impossible to air seal the attic. And B, there's been some critters and animals and bats and stuff that have been active in the attic. So the existing insulation has come to be a little bit saturated with feces and animal urine, and what's in your attic is, quite frankly, it's in the air in your house too. So we're going to get that stuff out of there so it can help with a little bit better air quality inside the house as well. So once the insulation is removed and we've vacuumed out all the areas, then we go in with, depending on what we're actually air sealing, there's different applications, but a lot of times we're using 1-part foam and sealing up all the different air leaks. Or one tool that we use to help identify the air leakage locations is blower door testing and infrared camera or thermal camera to help us pinpoint some of the locations. A lot of times when blower door tests are done for an energy audit or something like that, they depressurize the house and basically suck all the air out of the house, and then they're measuring the air infiltration. When we're looking for the air leakage locations in the attic, we'll actually reverse the fan and pressurize the house, and then with a thermal gun inside the attic, we're able to point the camera to certain areas. And depending on the day and the weather circumstances, a lot of times you'll be able to see where there's actual cold air from inside the house escaping into the attic. The insulation that we're using today is a blown-in loose fill fiberglass insulation. It's made here in Canada, and the reason why we use the blown-in insulation is you get a more even and consistent depth of insulation across the entire attic. It helps to eliminate thermal bridging, which is when you lay bats in between wood studs. A lot of times, if you're just putting one layer of bats, you end up with what's called thermal bridging, and that's where you actually lose heat right through the wood trusses themselves. So by putting the blown-in stuff, it kind of gives a more uniform blanket of insulation across all the attic floor and all the other components that make up the roof. So the house, they'll be going from an R32 to an R60 in the attic. And basically what that's going to do is it's going to help keep the house warmer in the wintertime and cooler in the summertime. The way that insulation is designed to slow the transfer of heat. It doesn't stop heat transfer. It slows it down. So, I mean, you're basically doubling the amount of insulation. So it's going to take longer for the hot air in the summertime that's collected inside that attic to get into the home. And in the wintertime, it's going to keep the warm air inside the house longer. The big thing is when you combine the increased insulation with a more airtight house is when you'll really see start to see the savings and notice the improvements in comfort. Improving your home's air tightness and increasing the R values are one way that you can save on your heating and cooling and improve your home's energy efficiency. If you're looking for other ways, you can check out Natural Resources Canada's Greener Homes Grant Program, and they've got some great incentives for people who are looking to improve their home energy efficiency.
I'm Ron from Ron Linker Roofing, and I'm doing a insulating upgrade and new siding for the Stacy family. Essentially, the house was built in about the 70s with R12 insulation in the walls and no air infiltration barrier. So what we're putting on is a R9 isocyanurate insulating board with an air infiltration barrier. So once this is installed, and taped, it becomes an air barrier and prevents the movement of air from the inside of the home to the outside. And what that's going to do is it's going to prevent drafts and increase the R value of the home, almost double. With getting upgraded heating equipment, they're not likely going to notice much with energy savings from the insulation itself, because the new furnace will be that much more energy efficient, but it'll be much more comfortable. Everything will feel warm rather than having a draft from around the windows or from the floor. What we happen to do here with this cantilever portion is typically during construction, everyone thinks it's the other person's job to insulate the framing that's essentially outside. So I removed everything and upgraded the insulation and prevented that cold air from entering the floor system of the home, thereby causing it to be much warmer and comfortable. I've seen it quite often where the siding gets changed, they add an insulating board, but the insulating board only goes up to the existing soffit, leaving 8 inches of the original home exposed or not as upgraded as the remainder of the wall. So what we've done here is we've taken the soffit down, removed the nailing board, are installing the insulation directly to the underside of the roof rafters.
Okay. How did you feel about seeing yourselves, I guess, Steve, seeing yourself on the big screen for the first time in that video? That's the first question.
Yeah, it was good. I liked it. The videographer does a really good job.
Yeah, he's doing some filming for the whole project, so it'll be neat to see it all come together at the end.
I didn't get enough screen time.
No, were you off sick that day?
No, I was the one in the mask doing all the dirty work. He was pretty out front.
Yeah, kissing babies and shaking hands and stuff.
Yeah.
Does Jamie, would you mind keeping an eye on the chat? I'm not sure if anyone's popping any questions in or not, but I have a couple of questions. Do you work with cellulose as well? And can you speak to fiberglass versus cellulose? And
We haven't really done much cellulose installs, to be honest. They both have their pros and cons. They're both recycled material, whereas like this fiberglass insulation we use is 70% recycled glass. The cellulose insulation is a recycled newspaper product. Cellulose, it's treated with some chemicals to become fire retardant, whereas the fiberglass is a naturally fire retardant product. So the glass itself is non-flammable, so they don't have to treat it with a chemical to provide the fire resistance qualities. And I guess like another thing too with this cellulose, one of the reasons we haven't really gotten it much into using it too much is that it does settle a lot as well. So whereas fiberglass should only settle about 1%, and cellulose can settle up to 30%. So a lot of times people, they want to do it and they don't want to have to worry about it for a long time, whereas cellulose, after a certain amount of time, you're likely going to have to add some more. So yeah, I mean, they're both good products, and as long as they're installed properly, you're going to have the same benefit to the thermal comfort and the R value and all that kind of stuff. And yeah,
we did open our company up during COVID kind of thing, and materials were kind of tough to come by, and fiberglass was readily available to us, and we've liked how it's worked for us. We've liked the application of it, so we've kind of stuck with it. Not opposed to using cellulose down the road as we grow as an option, but for now we've stuck with fiberglass. We've been pretty successful with it.
I do understand the question. Like one of the things as an installation contractor is you look at the products that you're using and the embodied carbon. So I mean your end goal is to reduce the carbon emissions of the house and the greenhouse gas emissions, but there's also greenhouse gas emissions and that goes into manufacturing these products. So you do have to kind of look at, okay, well, yeah, we're going to reduce the greenhouse gases of the house, but how much carbon was used to produce these products. And it's cool. I mean, there's places around the world that are way ahead of us in the building materials and the availability in the product or the supply chain for some of these products. It would be nice if there was some products that you could use it in Canada that were easier to access that had lower embodied carbon, but right now like it's
Expensive and hard to come by.
it's hard to find those products. So I do understand where you're coming from with the question.
I was trying to source the fiberboard exterior insulation as well for Ron, and he was open to trying to use it, but unfortunately also it was not available. And I believe it won't be available until November. So we were waiting for about 6 months to try to get it, but it just wasn't an option. So
yeah. There was a company in Quebec that was manufacturing like a cork product for blown in insulation, and I'm pretty sure that they're not doing it anymore. And like, I don't know if it's just the supply and getting the materials and manufacturing it. And then at the same time too, is a lot of times these materials, they cost quite a bit more. So it's hard to, explain to the homeowner that, yeah, we're going to use a product that costs 3 times as much and going to do the same end result for your house. It's just less, less impact on the environment than producing it. So it's a tough conversation to have. I mean, if the products and stuff are more available and more cost effective, then
We would absolutely try.
yeah, it would be something that we'd be all about.
cool. Yeah, I heard of someone potentially making a new product with mushrooms, which I'm looking forward to hearing more about. the development.
Delicious.
Yeah. Jamie, are we good? You'll interrupt me if anyone else wants to.
I will. I have a question if you are looking for some, Marianne, but I was wondering to the Stephen, what do you think like the biggest mistake that you guys see with people trying to do their own air sealing and insulation? Where do people go wrong the most, you think, with the houses that you've been in?
Not a lot of people tackle the attic spaces for air sealing, because to do that, to do it right, you'd have to have tools to remove all the insulation, like a vacuum, or people willing to go up there and actually bag it all up and identify those areas. So as far as air sealing in the home is concerned, if they've had an energy audit done like Kai does, and the energy auditor identifies, you could caulk around your windows here, you could put in some wall gaskets. Those are things that homeowners can kind of grasp and do those correctly. But we haven't run into a lot of people who've done their own insulation, called us to redo the insulation. So we haven't run into that problem. We usually go into homes that the previous homeowner has done the insulation, and we see problems that they've done, whether they've laid bats the wrong way or just kind of thrown them in haphazardly, and they're not sitting flush with the
Flat on the
ceiling, or they're placed over top of a pot light or over top of a bathroom fan, and you really have to cut those into sizes or fill the gaps around them with spray foam or cellulose or loose fill them. Without renting the equipment, you can't blow in insulation by yourself. You have to have the equipment. So most people just try and throw bats in there and say that they've done the insulation. So
there's some good resources though for people who like are handy and they want to tackle this stuff by themselves. There's one organization, it's called NAMA, and they're the North American Insulation Manufacturers, and they basically represent like the Rockwell, the Owens Corning, and Certainty, and a lot of these insulation manufacturers, and they have stuff that's available on their website for homeowners about if you're going to try to do this stuff, And another great resource is Natural Resources Canada. They have a publication and it's called Keeping the Heat In. And it has all kinds of stuff about air sealing in the attic and different applications and what you should do if you come across an IC rated pot light and a non-IC rated pot light, and
Fire caulking around certain exhaust
yeah,
pipes and stuff like
your
that.
furnace flues and stuff like that that come through the attic. There's lots of cool stuff on, you know, that's available for homeowners that are looking to do that kind of stuff. So it is, I mean, the attic can be a little bit, you know, it's tight space, it can be hot in the summertime, and it's not the, you know, most
It's not hot.
desirable place to be crawling around and working. So most of the time the homeowners aren't really looking to pull out all their insulation in the attic and do the air sealing themselves, as they're calling in a professional to do it.
Here's a question.
Yes. Did someone speak up?
Yes,
Looks like there's a question.
there is. I can read it out. Looks like from Andrea or Andrea, sorry if I mispronounce. They said that they've been dreaming about making the attic a space to occupy, like a bedroom or rec room. Would this limit the energy efficiency of the space, or as opposed to having it remain vacant with the insulation increases?
Yeah, I mean,
Well,
sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, that depends on how you do it.
Yeah.
You know, if you do it well, then no, it could be a very energy efficient space. But if you don't, it could remain leaky and uncomfortable. It can be, you know, tricky to work up there. You should get a building permit. They're going to require you to insulate it to the building code standard, which is good because that tends to be a fairly high number these days. It can be difficult to get at spaces up there to thoroughly air seal them. But you know, if you put good windows up there and you get high enough R values in the slopes and in the flat, then it can be a fine thing to do. You may have to build out the slopes in order to have enough thickness for lots of R value. You know, normally the slopes are just 2x4s and you can only fit kind of R12 in there, and that's nowhere near enough in the attic these days. But you know, that's part of doing a renovation well.
We've done some work in already existing attics that have been converted, and they complain about it being too cold in the winter, too hot in the summer, and we've had to go in, remove the insulation that was used to be on their walls. It has since fallen off. So we've beefed it up with R12 bats and then secured those bats with more rigid foam to create more like an R20,
R24.
R24
Those are
wall?
for the knee wall.
For the
but
knee wall
the slopes-
parts.
Yeah.
The
If
slopes
you're-
are hard to do.
But if you're doing a complete renovation and you're turning an attic into a 1.5 story or a loft space, then you have the opportunity to do it however you want. You can build out the walls, make them thicker, and make the slopes 2x10s instead of 2x4s, and you can do it right if you're starting from scratch. But some of these houses that were built in the 1950s as a 1.5 story house, well, they're
Too late.
Yeah, they are gonna, well, you often hear the homeowners complaining it's super hot up here in the summertime and super cold in the wintertime.
It's a 2-season room, basically. It's like once the spring starts, we can use it, and then once the fall starts, we can use it. But other than those 2 times, they try and stay out of there.
Well, and so there was a related question about, you know, how do you deal with cathedral ceilings? A cathedral ceiling means any sloped ceiling that is a closed sandwich with the roof on the top and the drywall underneath. And they're tricky because they are closed. There's no cavity there. Presumably the cavity that is there has already got something in it. But they're normally just made of 2x4s, so it's probably only an R12 bat. And really, it's much easier to do it from the inside. It's very awkward to do it from outside because you know that's the roof with the shingles, and it would be very disruptive and expensive, and you would only have a limited amount of the roof area outside that is under the slope. So you would have to do it from the inside, and there's really 2 ways of doing it. The first is you are going to literally gut the entire space so that you've taken the surfaces off and you've exposed the 2x4s, and then you can build out those. You would fur out the 2x4s so that it's not just a 4-inch space, so you could have an 8-inch space or more. and fill that with insulation, and then cover that with rigid insulation, so that you're also insulating the wood itself, because the wood doesn't have a very high R value, and then put drywall on. If you're not going to go to the extent of gutting the whole space, you can just put rigid board insulation on top of the sloped ceiling. You have to find those rafters to nail it into, and then put a new layer of drywall on top. And you're not going to get as much R value added that way, because there are limits on how thick that can be. But that's another option.
Yeah.
Good point.
Yeah, and then when you do it from the inside, you lose a little bit of headspace, but I mean, it's a lot less intrusive than ripping the entire space apart and going right down to the bare bones and the studs.
More of a problem for him than me. I'm fine with small ceilings.
Cool. I have a question that's probably the most annoying question that people ask you often, but let's say there's an average house with an average attic going from like an R20 or R30 up to R50 or R60 with blown in. What percentage of the incentive, what does it cover in terms of the cost? So I know there's up to 1,000, I think, for air sealing, and then there's another chunk for attic insulation. So what percentage are folks paying out of their own pocket, would you say, give or take?
Again, obviously, it's going to vary from house to house. For as far as the $1,000 incentive for air sealing, we can only you have to provide an invoice for them to submit for the rebates. So without removing the existing insulation, we wouldn't be able to provide an invoice to qualify for the whole $1,000 incentive. And you also need a 30% increase from the energy audit start to finish. I believe, is that right, Kai? 30%?
Actually, the air leakage control incentive target varies depending on how leaky the house is to begin with. If it's a very leaky house to begin with, the percent improvement that's required is bigger than if it's already pretty tight, for obvious reasons. You can't achieve as much when it's already tight.
Right.
Okay.
But yeah, so I mean, generally, if we're doing an attic and we're removing the insulation and we're air sealing everything, they're and if they were less than R12 with the Greener Homes grant, it's very top heavy for homes that are have lower levels of insulation. So if you start with less than R12 and you do the whole attic up to R50 for the Greener Homes, you can get $1,800 back. Plus, if you meet the highest level of air sealing, is another $1,000. So potentially you can get up to $2,800 back for doing air sealing and attic insulation. Now,
putting a percentage on that.
For percentage, that could be that depending on the size of the house, it could be 50% of the cost of the project, or we've done smaller houses and removed the bats of insulation in there, and the homeowner's gotten everything except for the taxes back. So I mean, depending on the size of the house, I'd say your average is around 50%. If we're doing a removal to air seal it and do it all, and
they qualify for the highest level of air sealing.
And Kai, can you speak to is going just through Greener Homes the best way to go there, or are people stacking if they're Enbridge clients?
People are doing both. The list of incentives that's available from the two programs is similar, but not quite the same. Obviously, Enbridge has incentives if you want to install new gas burning equipment, either space heating or hot water heating. The federal government doesn't pay for any gas burning equipment. Instead, they have incentives for electric heat pumps. And then the incentives for insulation and windows and so on vary between the two programs. But that's again something to talk to your energy advisor about, because whether it makes sense to do just one program or both, or or the other, it really has to do with what the specific opportunities are in your house. Where are your R values starting? Which of the things are you going to improve? To what extent are you going to improve them? You have up to $10,000 available from the two grants, and your advisor will certainly help you maximize the amount of incentive that you can get back from using both programs if possible.
one thing about the programs, and they both of them, they start with an energy audit and they finish with an energy audit. And the energy audit, Kai said as well, is it's a great tool to find out where to start and what you should focus on first. Well, the last thing you want to do is go out and, you know, put in a $20,000 heat pump and then do all your insulation and your air sealing and everything to find out that the heat pump is incorrectly sized for the house now that you've done all these renovations. So using the energy advisor and the roadmap that's provided with your report from the audit, it's definitely a good tool to have. So, you know, the first step is getting that energy audit done and then going from there.
And as you said earlier, doing all of the building envelope stuff first.
Yeah.
Reduce the heating requirement of the building as much as you possibly can, and then look at the mechanical equipment that's, you know, that's heating the building, because at that point, the size of a heat pump you need may only be a $10,000 heat pump instead of a $20,000 heat pump.
Yeah.
It's funny you
Very
should mention
important.
that, Kai, because this webinar series has been carefully curated to put those steps of action in order. So this is the first building envelope section after understanding what we're doing in the first place, and then we'll move on to other areas of focus tomorrow with the HVAC and hot water. So thank you very much. And we do have another episode, as I mentioned, that's tomorrow at 5:30 with
7. Well, tomorrow's at 7, isn't it?
Tomorrow's at 7. Sorry, yeah, tomorrow's at 7. Thank you very much.
Yeah.
An alteration in the regular throws me off. The folks on the screen have helped make the series possible. And if anyone has any questions or follow-up, you are welcome to email me at the address at the bottom of the screen. And we are grateful to have you all here, and thanks for answering the questions. And we'll see you tomorrow.
See you tomorrow.
Thank you.